Well, thank you for joining. Some of you said that you were looking forward to that session, so no pressure. Hope you're not gonna be disappointed, and I'm gonna teach you one thing or two. So why I wanted to do a tech talk on cloud is because it's one of our enterprise tech areas of focus for this year. It's also because we have new members of the team that have been joining that you might not necessarily know what cloud is all about. So I thought, that would be good to do that and also to refresh our minds because we often write about, cloud, digital transformation, big data, but actually do we know what that means? I'm not sure. So those are the reasons why I wanted to do a tech talk on cloud. So first, can anybody tell me what cloud is? What do you think cloud is?
It's a big white thing in the sky.
Okay. No? Anybody else? Okay. Rich?
Computing network.
Not too far.
Virtualized storage.
Okay. So if you look at what Gartner say cloud is, so for them they define cloud computing as a style of computing in which scalable and elastic IT-enabled capabilities are delivered as a service using internet technologies. There are actually three words in there that you really need to care about: scalable, elastic, and as a service. So you need to think about cloud if it was like a utility, like if it was electricity, water, etc. We all have a meter reading in our house, right, in our flats. That actually counts the number of kilowatts hours used. So it actually measures, how much power you have used over time, right? So the nice thing about it, let's say you get heating through electricity. One day it's cold, you're gonna turn the heating on. The other day it starts to be warm, you're gonna turn it off, right? So you actually just, turn it on and off whenever you want. You actually don't need to plan ahead. So that means it's scalable, right? Up and down. And then you only pay for what you use. When you receive your, bill, your electricity bill, I don't know how you pay, like a monthly, quarterly, etc. You will see actually how much of electricity you've used, and you're gonna pay based on what you've used. You're not gonna pay like a exact same number every month, right? It goes up and down. It obviously goes up, during winter, and it goes down during summer. And I think as a service, we all understand what that means. We have, somebody providing us with, a service, okay? So, but to really understand what actually cloud is, you need to understand the history of it, okay? So before the cloud arrived, if you wanted to, provide a website to somebody, have your own website, you needed to have a server. To own your server, have a physical server where you were working, right? And you could only run one operating system, so Windows or Linux or iOS, on one server at one time, right? So it was quite restricted. Then VMware came along. For me, VMware is a dinosaur because it's sort of like a dying company. To be honest, they've not been really innovating, but they actually are the ones that have allowed, cloud computing to exist. So what VMware started to offer is called virtualization, right? So virtualization is a technology that allows you to create multiple simulated environments or dedicated resources from a single physical hardware system. So they have a software called Hypervisor that connects directly to your hardware or server, and to allow you to split that server or system into separate, distinct, environment that is known as virtual machines, right? That's what VMware stands for. And with virtualization, you basically can run more than one operating system on one service, right? So, and that allows, different customers to use the same server. So if you have a customer that is using Linux as an operating system, but you have another one that is using Windows as an operating system, you can actually run both on the same server, right? So you actually can use the full capacity of your server as well. So really, cloud computing couldn't have existed without virtualization, right? And VMware is actually the company who actually brought this to life. But then the cloud computing, as we know it, started with one company. Do you know who started cloud computing? No? No? Anybody? Amazon, yeah. So why them? So Amazon is a shop, right? So, and it's very seasonal. You know, it gets busier during certain periods, like Christmas. I think we've all seen the number of packages that Amazon was delivering to us in our offices in December. Valentine's Day can be another one. And basically, they had to buy enough servers to cope with that traffic for these busy periods. But when it's quiet during summer, they still have these servers, they are still paying for these servers, they are still paying for power, for cooling, for maintenance, but they are not using them, right? So they're basically throwing money out of the window. So what they actually figured out is that they actually could sell the capacity of their servers to other companies, right? So, and they figured that this is with virtualization that they could do that. So this is how they started basically selling cloud by the hour, right? And this is how they started to make a lot more money and basically had that return on investment, for buying all of these servers. So before they started selling capacity, they were actually buying 1 rack of servers per day. So imagine how much that costs, right? 1 rack of servers per day, plus power, cooling, maintenance, etc. It's really, really expensive. So if you look at Amazon today, Amazon Web Services, right, business unit, is actually one of their biggest revenues generator. So I've checked the last figures. Amazon Web Services represent 12% of their overall revenue. And in 2017, Amazon Web Services accounted for all of Amazon's operating income, right? It's massive. And then the other part of the history is KVM. So KVM, there's actually no picture about that. It's not something, physical, right? So you don't really have pictures about it. So that's why I've just added this, so you can see how it looks when it actually runs on your computer. So we said that to be a cloud provider, you need to have virtualizations, right? It's a core technology to be able for cloud computing to exist. But AWS is actually not using VMware. They've decided to use KVM, which is an open source solution. So that means kernel-based virtual machine, and that's part of Linux. So they've chosen them because they don't need support. Amazon, they have the developers that understand, KVM internally. They know how to run it. They know how to fix it if there's an issue. They don't need the support for VMware, and that was a way for them to actually, reduce cost as well, because VMware, although they have a good virtualization solution, is expensive, right? So if you have your developers in-house that know, how to actually fix an issue, then it's going to cost you less, all the time, right? So, and it's thanks to actually KVM, so the open source software that Amazon is using, that if you are, let's say you have your own website, you log on to the Amazon Web Services account online, you can just click a button and say, I want to add a new server, and it's because of KVM that you are able to do this. So if you think about the utility analogy, basically KVM is essentially the cable in your wall. So you couldn't actually turn on lights if you didn't have cable in your wall, right? So KVM, just to explain it a little bit more, is basically a piece of software that are going to segregate the different operating systems. So you're going to be able to run hundreds of operating systems on the same server, right? So for Amazon Web Services is perfect. They are selling, so much actually by the hour by using KVM, right? So, and actually cloud computing is sort of like a natural direction, for the market. That was really the next step after, virtualization. And if Amazon wouldn't have done it, someone else would have. And actually, this is why I think VMware is quite, a dinosaur and actually didn't innovate or didn't actually take the opportunity. They could have conquered the cloud, right? They had the virtualization product, and they could have actually started to sell by the hour as well to, all of, their customers, right? But they actually didn't react to it because for them, they could see the amount of money that they were getting by selling, hardware to people, and the money they would getting by selling capacity by the hour would be smaller. So if you're one of the guys working at VMware, you go see the CEO and say, look, this is a great opportunity for us. We can make a lot of money, if we start selling by the hour, but the CEO is going to look at, okay, this is what I could get by selling hardware. This is what I'm going to get by actually selling, capacity by the hour. So actually didn't jump on this opportunity. So it was really like a short-term thinking. They didn't actually realize that on the long term, they would be able to make a lot of money. They had all of these great enterprises customers. They, all of the big banks, they're using VMware. But they could have actually then sold them capacity by the hour, especially these days because everybody's actually moving to the cloud, right? So they actually missed the opportunity. We've all written about the benefits of the cloud, balance and things like this. So I think we sort of know benefits. But first is flexibility. So if you remember the definition, users, they can just basically scale services to fit their needs. You can customize application and you can access basically cloud services from anywhere in the world with any internet connected devices, right? You also don't need to actually buy services up front and do capacity planning, which is another benefit. And you can also choose between different options, so public cloud, hybrid cloud, private cloud, and I will come on to that in a second. Then the other benefit is efficiency. So accessibility is one, obviously. Cloud-based application and data can be accessible via any virtually any internet-connected devices. Speed to market, so you can develop in the cloud. Developing in the cloud basically enables users to get the applications to market quickly. That's another way of doing it. And in terms of savings, so like we said, you don't need to buy hardware anymore, other equipment, so costs are lower. You also don't need to buy services up front, and you don't need to do capacity planning. So basically, a utility pay structure means that you only pay for what you use. And the third cloud benefit is strategic value. So streamlined work is one. So cloud service providers, they actually manage the underlying infrastructure. So you don't need to care about it as a customer. You can just focus on building your all applications and sell your stuff, right? Also, the other one is regular updates. So, cloud service providers, they regularly update, what they offer. So to give you the most up-to-date technology. You can also collaborate, worldwide across teams, so in terms of, time, resources, is really important. And then there's a competitive edge to it. It was more of a competitive edge 5 years ago than it is now because everybody's moving to the cloud, but that's still an important factor. You still have big companies that are still not, running on the cloud, right? They're still using their own hardware and paying lots of, money on it. Okay. So the misconception, that's my favorite bit. So can anybody tell me what public cloud is? Yeah, so essentially that public cloud is that's the definition. So that means that you're basically using, a server that is available to the public, right? So when people talk about public cloud, they often refer to Google, Microsoft, AWS, IBM, and Alibaba. These are actually the 5 big, providers. Amazon is by far actually the first provider because it owns 33% of the market. But combined together, those 5 companies, they own 75% of the market, right? And actually, Alibaba is a company that's worth watching because they've been including in actually the top 5 since about a couple of years now. And they essentially, China-based AWS, right? They are doing exactly the same thing. So if you want to actually, be the most up-to-date on cloud, I would suggest that you look at the players that are coming in and coming out, because Amazon is still the first player, but they are Alibaba and Google and Microsoft are more and more eating their pie of their piece of the pie, basically. But if you just go back to the term cloud itself, right? So before the term cloud came about, people were talking about IaaS, so infrastructure as a service, right? And the first service that AWS offered, and it actually still offers it, was called S3. That means simple storage solution, right? There's no cloud in there. So like we said, you basically just pay for the amount of space you need or data you need. So cloud is actually just a marketing term. Infrastructure as a service is cloud, right? And actually a lot of techies don't like it. Most of them don't like it because it's just a marketing term. They've always known IaaS. When they talk about that together, they don't use the term cloud, they use the term infrastructure as a service, right? Cloud is just a term that encapsulates everything related to infrastructure as a service. So you hear a lot of things about as a service. So you have, platform as a service, you go software as a service, etc., etc. Everything actually has to be related to infrastructure as a service, which is, cloud. Okay. Hybrid cloud. So hybrid cloud is just about connecting your own servers, hardware, to the public cloud, so Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc., right? So for some cases, it makes sense to have your own servers and also have public cloud, but it's still there to actually confuse people, right? It's not hybrid cloud. 50% is your own hardware, 50% is public cloud. So hybrid cloud, by definition, actually doesn't exist either, right? It's just there to sell you more, right? Just a marketing term that we write about. But my favorite is private cloud. Do you know what private cloud is? So actually, private cloud doesn't exist at all. Private cloud is on-premise, right? It's just a marketing term that is there to confuse people. It just simply doesn't exist. So if you read something that says private cloud, public cloud, this is bullshit. Private cloud doesn't exist, right? And I think a lot of people don't actually realize. They think it's another thing. Because we're talking about hybrid cloud, public cloud, private cloud is something different. Private cloud is on-premise. It has been there for forever, right?
Yeah, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, maybe, but it's still you're basically just running your own hardware or servers basically in your own data center. That's the only thing that you're doing.
It's not my fault.
Right, it's not scalable. No, it's not scalable, it's not elastic. You could argue that this is as a service, because if you have actually a team that is dedicated to running the hardware, servers, etc., then if you're another team and you need access to it, then they provide you a service, right? But this is not scalable, this is not elastic. Okay? And it should actually just be called IaaS, like we said earlier, infrastructure as a service, or on-premise, basically. So you could argue that private cloud would work for like a global bank, right? Because a global bank would have teams around the world that are going to use the servers at different times, right? So they will still be used at some like full capacity, if you wish. But you really need to be very, very big to only have, private cloud and decide to actually not move to, the public cloud, basically. So basically, yeah, private cloud is just on-premise. It's no different. And I think cloud is very simple at the end of the day. We're just trying to make it more complicated, and it's always a good way of actually, selling more stuff when you make something complicated, because you're confused, you don't know what that means, and somebody's going to tell you, no, but this is great, this is the benefits, this is how much it costs, etc. Just go for it, and they just do it and actually don't ask themselves questions, right? And that's it really, that's what I wanted to talk about.